The topic I'm going to be talking about today is quiet quitting, which is hitting all of the major news outlets such as Forbes, The Economist, Zero Hedge, The Wall Street Journal. It's become the fashionable thing to talk about. And really the question is how is quiet quitting different than the anti-work movement or people just being lazy at their jobs? Let's find out. Quiet quitting, really, as a summary, is basically doing the minimum amount of work needed to not get fired or to slack off as much as you could get away with at your job without getting fired. This is a common mentality in many government jobs across the world and is very common in even the private sector in certain parts of the world, such as Europe. But now it is spreading all over the world, particularly in places previously known for the reputation of hard work in Asia and the United States. The question is this different? Paul Ferry did a great Twitter feed called A Brief History of Nobody Wants to Work Anymore. And he goes through headlines basically through every period of low unemployment from the present all the way back to the 1890s, that there have been consistent headlines of people not wanting to work. Like in 1894, a newspaper was quoted, "With all the mines in the country shut down by strikers, what will the poor editor do for coal next winter? It's becoming apparent that nobody wants to work these hard times." And in 1905, labor is scarce, high, and very unreliable. Nobody wants to work for wages. So, yeah, these aren't old complaints. People have been complaining about people not willing to work for over 100 years. So what makes it different now? What makes it different now, it's starting to show up in the productivity statistics. If you look at the non-farm business labor productivity data, which measures the output in dollars per hour for all employed people outside of agriculture, we have had 2 consecutive quarters of contraction outright. And the minus 2.4% pace is the lowest since at least the 1980s. And it just continues a steady downtrend. Productivity really peaked like in the 1990s and early 2000s. And really slowly but surely, it's been trending lower, the growth of productivity. You have spikes that usually happen right after recessions. Like you had a spike in 2002 and 09. You had one in late 2020, early 2021. And it's just a resumption of productivity when demand gets restored after a recession. But the highs are lower and the lows are lower. And like if you look at a stock chart, that's a downtrend. And seeing that in productivity is very concerning. It just means that less people are producing. You have less stuff being produced per hour of work, or people are just working less hours concealed behind work remote screens. And this is a major red flag. That's why it matters. And you've seen movements around the world preaching this type of quiet quitting or anti-work, which is outright just opting out of the workforce and settling just for the bare minimum gig economy employment you need to keep a roof over your head. And it's not just the United States. You've had, and I talked about this in my anti-work video series, but around the world, you have the lying flat movement in China, the Frieder and Hikikomori culture in Japan, and basically whatever has been happening to the European labor movement since the 70s in general. And you just have this work to live ethos that's historically associated with Scandinavia and France and other parts of Western and Mediterranean Europe is now spreading across the rest of developed economies and China, which have lagged a generation or two. So why did it happen in Europe first, and why is it catching up now? A lot of it really has to do with, first, is the expansion of the welfare state. Social welfare state has expanded in a lot of these countries, And the internet has made people aware how cushy the lives are for lower middle class Europeans, and they want a piece of that themselves. And on top of that, the expansion of the welfare state um, allows for people to have less consequences if they decide to opt out, or ease or reduces the pain of getting fired enough that quiet quitting becomes a viable alternative. The other thing is the strength of the labor market. Unemployment rate continues to be near record lows in the full employment territory. And since it's fairly easy to get a new job right now, the risk of quiet quitting and getting fired for it is lower because, one, your employer will have a hard time replacing you due to the tightness of the labor market, and two, it will be easier for you to find a new job because of the overall tightness of the labor market. And then last but not least, which I think is the biggest and most obvious reason, is just simply real pay is not high enough to justify working above and beyond. Uh, I talked about this too in the anti-work series, but in the old days, like, it didn't take that much due to how much lower housing and education costs were to live what is considered a middle class lifestyle. Like, you can easily do that on, say, 60 to 80K in today's money, that you'd be able to own a house in a major metropolitan area, have a new car, be able to go on a family vacation once or twice a year, and pay for your kids' college. Nowadays, for that same type of lifestyle, it would be $200,000 a year. And most working professional jobs, even for college graduates today, outside of Wall Street or very high performance based compensation industries, and maybe doctors and lawyers, I'd put at the exceptions too, the professional salary usually ranges between 60 to 160K. Maybe the higher end of the corporate job ladder, maybe in the low 200s. But in most cities, other than maybe having a little bit of extra money for savings and a bigger budget to go on vacations, if you're a single person, 60K to 160K is not that much different in terms of material lifestyle quality. And so if the upside of working hard is maybe an extra $5,000 to $20,000 a year, and it doesn't really move the needle in terms of what you need to save for the down payment of a house or to just materially consistently improve your lifestyle, why bother working the extra amount for the promotion where you probably get more hours and more stress for not enough pay and no real material change in your lifestyle? And I think progressive taxation and bracket creep, where the tax brackets don't rise as fast as real underlying inflation due to them being tied to CPI, the after-tax income from these marginal gains is even less. So let's just say you are in the 30% tax bracket and you make an extra $10,000 a year. That's really an extra $7,000 per year after tax. Is an extra $7,000 per year going to move the needle to put in an extra 5-10 hours a week? For most people, the answer is no. And that is why quiet quitting is more popular. I think the quiet quitting problem could easily be fixed if you do one of four things, and only one of them is really in the control of a business owner. The others are more macroeconomic or government policy ones. So we'll start with the ones that concerned business owners can't really do anything about. The first one is you would need to have a dramatic crash in the labor market, which, if you raise interest rates in a high enough, that could happen. And if workers have less bargaining power, then the quiet quitting is not very viable anymore. The second thing that could happen is that you would cut the welfare state and other social protections that make it easier for people to be comfortable just slacking off on their job. Given the current political climate, that's very unlikely that that would happen. The third thing you could do is have real wages rise by 50% or more. And the keyword is real here. Like, if you had nominal wages go up that much, and all that money just goes into higher rents or higher food or higher gas prices, it's not going to do any good. It doesn't solve the problem. But that's difficult. How do you raise the wage scale for everybody without it resulting in collective inflation? I mean, there are ways to bring down the labor supply without bringing down the supply of other goods and services in certain industries. But wages are a big driver of inflation. I think the most effective way to do this would be to drastically increase the housing supply and cause the housing market to tank, because that's 30 to 40% of most consumers' budgets. And if housing was in real terms the same cost as it was in the 80s or 90s, then the money that was previously being used to cover rent or mortgage payments is now free to be other parts of the economy, and people won't feel poor anymore. And as a result, the quiet quitting will go away because, hey, look, I can actually afford to buy a house anymore. Look, I can save enough money to really get ahead, whether it's to retire, start a business, or whatever. So that's from a macroprudential policy perspective, reallocating disposable income away from all going to landlords and banks who own mortgages to other parts of the economy would fix it. But that's due to the strength of the housing lobby and a lot of structural factors there. That's not an overnight solution. And the one that business owners could really apply to fix quiet quitting would be to rewire pay so that the success of the company actually matters to an employee's bottom line. There are some industries that are very good at this, particularly the industry I come from, which is Wall Street finance. If you work at an investment bank or a hedge fund or a private equity firm, and your fund does well, or your trading desk does well, or your team at the bank does well, you're going to get paid. You're going to get a fat bonus because it was because of your efforts that you were able to generate those returns or close those deals. And Wall Street, for all the criticism it gets, the people who work there are very aware of how much they are worth. And so that's why they're able to get paid on what they're worth. We need to spread that to other industries. I mean, there are some, like people work in sales, they get paid commissions based on what they sell. But if you spread this kind of mentality that I have some sort of control and ownership in my pay, then you're going to have people work a lot harder. And as a business owner, you would benefit from this too, because you would make more money from having a more productive workforce. So say, for example, instead of paying all your employees an average of a base salary of $130,000 a year, you pay them a base instead of 90 to 100K, but you give bonuses that range anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000, depending on how well the company does and how well your individual performance of the employee is. Some, it's easy to quantify. Like if you have a P&L on a trading desk, or you're a sales guy and have a quota, you could quantify that. For jobs that are more administrative or harder to quantify, there will have to be other benchmarks that are created. And it's up to management theorists and consultants to kind of come up with the details on this. But I figured there would be at least some metric to show how this employee does benefit the bottom line, and even if it's just cutting costs. But the problem is, if you can't measure that and there's no evidence that this employee does create any value, whether in terms of increasing the top line or increasing the bottom line through reducing costs, then why is this person even working at your company? Like, it would probably result in leaner workforces in the short term, when the people who are just sitting at the pool and playing around on their smartphone when they're saying they're working remotely will get axed. And or people in unproductive jobs that didn't really have much of a role other than showing up and sending a few emails will be reorganized to places that they are more productive. And if you are an employer and you really want to cut costs or find a way to give bonuses to the people who do things that are more of a cost side of the business, then you can incentivize, like, okay, if you find a way anywhere in the company to cut costs without hurting the productivity of the firm and the quality of the goods and services delivered by the firm, then you should be paid a bonus as a percentage of the savings. Like if you told every back office staff member, for every place you're able to cut costs, we'll reimburse you 25% of the cost savings and give it to you as a salary bonus, then your staff's going to be incentivized a lot more to be willing to cut costs. And I think you can do that too with time as well as money. So say if you have employees who really just have bought into the work to live ethos of the French, and just they don't really want the extra money, they just want 6 or 7 weeks of vacation. Be like, look, if you can get all the year's work done in 10 months, I'll give you an extra 2 months of vacation on top of your standard 2 weeks. Like, I'll let you take every day off Thanksgiving. There's probably plenty of industries, maybe not retail or finance, that you could take the entire December off, in more the clerical side of things at least, and not really miss a beat. Again, I'm not an expert in every industry and a consultant by trade. That's not my background, but you could a clever manager could reward their employees by just saying, hey, look, if you get your work done for the month, maybe if you need them every month, you can't let them just take off the entire month of December, but just say, hey, look, you get all of your month's assignments, they'll give them to you in the first of the month. If you get them all done by 3 weeks in, you can take the 4th week off. Or you could get a performance bonus and do more. Like that, there's ways we get creative with this to re-engage the workforce. And I really think it's not just what management says, oh, the boss is just mean and hurts people's feelings, or there's not sufficient like ping pong tables or community gatherings or any all the typical corporate stuff. It's more, I think, just that people feel like they're not getting paid enough to go above and beyond. This is more economic, but people don't like really to hear say that, because paying employees is expensive and business owners don't like to hear the solution, oh, you need to give everybody a raise. So that's my thoughts on this quiet quitting thing. Let me know what you think are the solutions to quiet quitting. Am I off about this? Is it really just a psyche and psychological motivation problem more than a dollars and cents problem, where I believe it to be? I'd love to hear your feedback.